Recording. Welcome, everyone. This is session 15 of our UL System Financial Wellness Series, Money Matters for 2023. I am Brian Bolton, finance professor at UL Lafayette. I am also the content expert for the UL System, content expert on financial literacy. And my job there is to create programs, tools, resources that help advance and educate and share knowledge related to financial literacy with all members of the UL system. This series has been kind of our summer project. All slides are or will be available at UL system website. I've got a one-page handout for each of the 15 sessions, and the videos from all sessions will be available. I believe we are currently transitioning platforms at the UL system that host the videos, but they will be available within days or maybe a week or two. And I will plan on sending an email link to everyone who registered for these sessions, just as a follow-up in a week or two to give you that access. Anyway, today's topic, our final topic, is navigating the impacts of inflation in turbulent economic times. And so when we thought of this topic 3 months ago, the economy was maybe a little more turbulent, maybe a little more uncertain. Inflation was certainly a bigger, more impactful concern with milk and eggs and grocery store prices continuing to rise. Past 3 months, maybe things have settled down a little bit, but that doesn't mean we're not still bothered by inflation. And today is August 2nd. There's been two pieces of news today that kind of affect this conversation, and I'll follow up on those in a few minutes. One is a jobs report. At the beginning of each month, a couple different agencies or entities report how many jobs were created the previous month. We got that report, one report this morning, Wednesday, August 2nd, and another kind of unusual announcement from Fitch, which is a debt credit rating agency for large corporate and government debt. An unusual decision by Fitch to downgrade U.S. government debt. Again, I'll follow up on that in a few minutes. So if you're following the stock market today, August 2nd, stock market's down about 1.5%, probably largely due to both of those issues. And so when we talk about turbulent economic times, this is part of it. Economic times are always uncertain. What we've experienced in, I'd say, 2022 and 2023 is both uncertainty and turbulence. And so the word turbulence to me kind of means the uncertainty and small shocks are having a bigger impact than maybe they have in other times. Certainly 2022, maybe economic markets are slightly less sensitive here in 2023, but today, again, August 2nd, we're seeing a lot of sensitivity to a couple different pieces of news. One piece of news is good news, one piece of news, bad or curious news. Anyway, so that's the backdrop of what we're talking about today. I'm Brian Bolton, professor of finance at UL Lafayette, brian.bolton@louisiana.edu. Please feel free to reach out to me with conversations about this topic or any others in the series. There's the series. This is my personal advent calendar. We've had 15 scheduled. We are now at the final one. And this one is a little unusual. This is not as much of a kind of a checklist or financial planning, personal finance topic. It's more kind of a broad macro perspective topic, giving us as individuals personal finance context, or on giving us kind of macro context on what may be happening in our own personal financial situations. So we'll talk about the macro effects as I just introduced, and we'll also kind of recap and connect some of the advice, ideas, thoughts that we've had in the previous 14 sessions. So we're connecting a number of issues, but it's a little bit different because it's got that macro perspective, a macroeconomic perspective that affects all of us. as always, we're trying to get to happiness. We're trying to balance the tension between short-term and long-term goals, family needs, financial needs, career needs, academic needs, business needs, whatever tensions, goals we have in our life. And the topic today is unique because it's this external factor that's going to be kind of overlaying all of our personal issues. Our short-term and long-term goals are going to be influenced by inflation, by the macro economy. Our needs may be compromised or enhanced by the macro economy. So today's topic, while we're still trying to focus on happiness, we're trying to get to that. I think when we're talking about inflation and turbulent economies, maybe happiness isn't the word, but we're maybe contentment, peace of mind, less anxiety, something like that. We're trying to manage our personal financial situations where the external stuff doesn't bother us as much. And that part of that is some decisions we make, but also some of that is a frame of mind. And so hopefully if we get rid of that stress, then maybe it leads to happiness. But today, unlike some of the others, that end goal is a contentment or peace of mind, comfort amidst kind of turbulent seas. That's where we're headed. Word of caution as we talk about this, when we talk about the economy, whether we're talking about interest rates, inflation, our own job security, prices, infrastructure, whatever macroeconomic issues, we are predicting the future. We are making small bets about big issues. And this quote from Niels Bohr, I always love to introduce in class, just to remind ourselves how difficult it is to predict the future. Prediction is difficult, especially about the future. Easy to predict the past, very difficult to predict the future. And so we're going to talk about kind of either predicting the future, predicting future economic events, or not necessarily predicting, but expecting. What should we expect? And those expectations influence what we do today. And that's why we need to kind of think about what may be happening in the future. Today's conversation, I will give a variety of predictions, opinions, perspectives, and guesses. This is just one guy's perspective. This one guy's prediction, one guy's opinions. I'm not Nostradamus. I'm a finance professor. I'm not retired with my own island in the Caribbean. I do get paid to study this, to think about this, think about the economy and the connection between the economy and personal finance. So hopefully my opinions, perspectives are reasonable and well-grounded, but they could be wrong. They could be horribly wrong. And I want to caution everyone watching, listening, that they may be wrong. And I want to encourage you to use your own research, your own forethought, your own situation to create your own perspective or context, and then maybe apply that to your situation. I'm not going to shy away. This is not a cop-out. I'm going to have some thoughts that maybe are more specific than others might give in such a situation, but they're just my own perspectives, guesses, opinions, call it whatever you want. And as we think about this, we are trying to predict the future. Introduce another quote from John Maynard Keynes, one of the kind of fathers of modern economics. And what he introduces, his quote is, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. So even if, let's assume that my predictions are all eventually 100% accurate, they may be wrong for a long time before they're accurate. Or they may be wrong direction for a while or whatever. And so no matter how reasonable, how right, whatever that means, our predictions may be, eventually economic turbulence, economic uncertainty, irrational behavior can make it painful to endure before we get to that accuracy, if that makes sense. So as we think about that, again, I'm thinking out loud, I'm talking out loud. This is a lecture that I frequently do in class with 30 students, and we engage in debate and we get people disagreeing. And it's a little different here when it's just me talking. But as I talk, feel free to think I'm way off base. Feel free to think that my predictions are going to be horribly wrong. But when you do that, form your own opinions and have your own foundation for why my perspective might be very misguided. Perfectly happy admitting if and when I'm wrong. But just make sure that you can kind of have some foundation or prediction for kind of what the own situation is. And also, even if my perspectives are right, that may not necessarily provide a prescription for what you should be doing with your own personal finance, if that makes sense. So take all these with kind of a grain of salt, use it as perspective and guidance, and then do your own research, create your own plans as we go forward. Today's topic is inflation. And inflation is a really peculiar macroeconomic dynamic. And so I wanted to introduce this kind of how we think about economics, how we think about inflation within economics. So imagine an example that you're thinking about getting a new refrigerator. Could be a car, could be a pair of shoes, whatever. But let's, refrigerator, pretty big purchase for most of us, and you don't want to overspend, and it's not an impulse purchase. You've got time. In this case, we've got a $1,000 refrigerator, costs $1,000 today. We want to buy it sometime in the near future. Could be today, could be 2 years, whatever that means. So it's $1,000, and you hear reports about inflation being really bad, whether it's on media or Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, whatever your sources, a year ago, inflation was 9.1%. The official government statistic was 9.1%. So you hear that. So, okay, I don't like that. I don't want to pay 10% more for my refrigerator. And so you're thinking that, and if inflation continues to be 10% over the next year, obviously the math is your $1,000 refrigerator will cost you $1,100. You don't like that, right? Your salary probably isn't going to go up by 10% over that year. Maybe your investments or savings somehow could or would, but you don't really want to count on that. But if you feel this inflation is going to increase, that scares you. It's painful, that additional $100. And think about a car, think about a house. And if inflation is the same percentage there, now we're getting into some serious pain. So you fear that if you wait a year, your $1,000 refrigerator will be $1,100. So you buy it today. You pull the trigger, you find the money, put on the credit card, whatever you need to do. You buy that $1,000 refrigerator today to avoid that 10% higher cost in the future. The paradox or the irony or whatever the right word is, thanks to the laws of supply and demand, you buying a refrigerator today drives prices higher today. So rather than wait and take whatever inflation happens, you have actually created inflation by not waiting. So the fear or expectation of future inflation, which is just a guess, we don't really know if it's really going to be that 10%, you've guaranteed that there's going to be inflation where you've done a very small part to create that inflation. So our fear of inflation actually makes realized inflation worse, because when we have needs, whether it's, again, new shoes, a house, a car, or a refrigerator, it actually makes inflation worse by acting on that fear. This fear and this increase only corrects or moderates very slowly, right? I may want to buy one refrigerator, but I'm not buying a refrigerator every year or every month, certainly. And so I'll do it once, there's that shock, and then it'll slowly moderate. I may be still buying shoes or a car or washer and dryer or clothes or other things after the refrigerator, but I don't have unlimited money and I don't have unlimited space to buy stuff. So eventually I slow down, but where the increase in inflation can happen pretty quickly, the moderation or the decrease is much slower to correct or adjust, let's call it. So that's kind of some of the dynamics behind inflation. And obviously for us as individual consumers, it can be painful, whether it's 10% on a refrigerator or 10 or 15% on eggs, whatever, it's painful. We don't want it. And so as we think about kind of where this initial dynamic came from or is coming from, I think it's important for us to kind of understand where it came from and why inflation is so high, and also very connected is why interest rates are so high right now. Where did this come from? two words, COVID-19. COVID-19 was the shock that created this situation where we are. And I don't want to get political. You can say President Trump should have done more to fight inflation. You can say President Biden should have done more to fight inflation, or they both, whatever. You can have, at the margin, either of them could have done more or maybe less or whatever. But in general, neither President Trump or President Biden created the uniquely high inflation scenario we're in now. It was COVID-19, that enormous shock to the economy that caused central banks and governments to kind of change how they were dealing with both fiscal policy and monetary policy in a super short period of time. In order to get us to that extreme uncertainty, really, which is right, spring of 2020 was the shock, and then most of us didn't travel the rest of the year. Some of us didn't go back to the office through the rest of 2020. And so this shock plus this extreme economic uncertainty that was going around the world, what happened? Governments and central banks increased the amount of money in the system. They threw money at the problem. So whether it's the PPP or just the Federal Reserve increasing the amount of assets that it had from 4 trillion to 7 trillion just during spring 2020. That's an enormous change. During the financial crisis 15 years ago, 2008, it went from 1 to 2, right? In here during spring of 2020, it increased by 3 trillion. And so that's effectively 3 trillion of extra cash injected in the economy. So what does that mean? How does that create inflation? Think of a pizza. The actual economies didn't change by 3 trillion, couldn't absorb that extra cash. So the result is each dollar bill that's in the economy is now worth less. And it's not just dollar bills, it's euros, it's yen, it's pesos. And currencies all around the world, every economy around the world did basically the same thing, increasing the amount of cash that's in the system, still supporting the same, or in some cases, smaller economies. The pizza example, if you cut a pizza into 16 slices instead of just 8, entire pizza still has the same total number of calories, but you've got to eat several more pieces to get full, maybe obviously twice as many. That's pizza inflation, and that's what happened in 2020. And that's why we saw 9.1% inflation a year ago. In order to try to slow this inflation, right? So the central banks kind of caused it by putting all this extra cash into the system in order to try to slow inflation, fight back. Central banks have done two things. One, pull out some of the new cash that was in the economy, kind of reverse what they did once the COVID shock and emergency situation was over. They could pull some money out, and then they could also raise interest rates. Those two things are effectively the same thing, but we as consumers kind of see it separately. By raising interest rates, they're going to slow down the economy, right? As an individual, I'm going to borrow more when rates are 3% than when they're 8%. People who refinance their home in 2020, 2021, brilliant, good for you. You're not doing that. Most people aren't refinancing their home now that mortgage rates are 6, 7, 8%. As we borrow less, we buy less. And as we buy less, supply and demand suggests that prices should moderate or eventually increase, probably decrease. If not decrease, at least stabilize. And so you kind of think of this as kind of counterintuitive that the central banks are now creating some pain. They're making life stink for us. Maybe, but they're trying to create this pain to avoid much bigger pain. Inflation going from 10 to 15 to 20%. That would be very significant pain for all of us. And if they can kind of increase interest rates, bring down inflation, and kind of have this delicate balance of a little pain, but not too much, then we can kind of get this Goldilocks soft landing outcome that optimizes or minimizes the total pain that we experience. And so when I said, introduced today, that there was a jobs report today, and the jobs report said in July, a whole 300,000 new jobs were created in the US. 300,000 is great. Average for the past 20 years has been less than 200,000, and we got 300,000. We'll get another official reading on August 4th on Friday. That, again, will nudge things one way or another. But we had a great jobs report, and the stock market is down 1.5% after that great jobs report. Why is that? It's due to this point. The Federal Reserve doesn't want that many jobs. Federal Reserve doesn't want us to necessarily lose our jobs, but it doesn't like these strong reports, because then that says just the economy is doing too well, inflation may follow, and which means the Federal Reserve has to increase interest rates even more and to fight that strength. The Federal Reserve wants not a strong economy, but maybe even a weak economy, not a bad economy, not a strong economy, but maybe a moderate to weak economy for the time being, kind of to optimize that pain. So when a jobs report comes out, 300,000 new jobs, that's great for July. What does the stock market see? The stock market sees, okay, this means the Federal Reserve is going to continue to raise interest rates. And again, when interest rates go up, I borrow less, you borrow less, the economy slows down. And so that's the shock, kind of why we're seeing the stock market respond to a really good jobs report with a negative perspective. As we think about kind of how these corrections take place, the US economy, the global economy, they're not speedboats. They change so slowly. They're enormous cargo freighters, take a long time to turn. We have 350 million consumers all living our lives. And if I make a change, maybe, to spend 10% less each month, think of how tiny that change is on the whole US economy. And if you make the change now, we maybe see some progress, but it takes a long time for just natural behaviors nudged or influenced by the central banks to change the course of the economy. And as it takes a long time, it will take a while for inflation to become to go away. So it took a while for it to become a problem after 2020, and it's going to take a while before it moderates or goes away, which means it will take a while for interest rates to come down. Bad news, or at least my opinion, bad news, I don't think we're going to see 3% mortgage rates for another couple of years at best, because we're going to continue kind of slowly, moderately fighting inflation and trying to get this balance right. Hopefully it happens. Hopefully get that moderation, and presumably this pain or this adjustment is less painful than what a worst case scenario would be. So let's, as we talk about this, let's go to a quick quiz. Just think about your answers. We have 4 nations here: United States, England, Germany, Mexico. Which of these currently, as of today, August 2nd, has the highest inflation rate? Those of us in the US, we may have a bias thinking that we have the worst. England currently has the highest inflation rate of these 4 major economies. Let's flip it. Which has the lowest? US, England, Germany, Mexico. Again, our US bias, we might be surprised by this, but the US has the lowest of these 4 major economies. As of at the end of June, our inflation rate was 3.0. We'll get the end of July numbers out in a couple of weeks. But the 3% inflation year over year increase in prices, much lower than everywhere else. And not only much lower, as the note at the bottom says, our inflation rate has come down a lot quicker than any other major nation, which is really good news for us, right? And at least on paper, that's really good news. As consumers, we may not feel like this has really happened. 3%, maybe it's higher than we're used to the last 10, 15 years, but that shock, that pain of the 9.1% we had 12 months ago, 13 months ago, we kind of still feel that, and we still feel the pain at the grocery store and the mall. And so inflation, again, is kind of this weird psychological thing that we try to, that affects us in unusual ways. 3%, if inflation was always 3%, that would be okay. But because of this coming off of this shock, we're still kind of psychologically bothered or influenced by that. So the reason I mention this, again, not to get political, but this is a global phenomenon. Our government, Federal Reserve, and presidents and Congress have done probably about as good a job as any major nation has in the past 2 to 3 years of managing inflation. 12 months ago, when we were at 9.1%, these other 3 nations were higher than that. I did this quiz 12 months ago, and the answers were the same. The numbers were different, but the answers were the same. So I'm not trying to praise our government, or maybe I am. So certainly I'm so far the Federal Reserve has gotten this balance between a little bit of pain and not too much pain. Got it pretty good. Those of us, when you go to the grocery store, you may not feel that, you may not appreciate that. If you've been unfortunate and lost your job, you certainly don't kind of feel or appreciate that balance of pain management. But at 350 million consumers in the US, there's always going to be kind of averages and trends that affect people differently. So what's the moral? I don't know what the moral is. It's a global phenomenon. Maybe it still stinks, but it's improving. And hopefully that improvement kind of continues. This is a personal finance conversation. What can you do? What can we do? And I'm just going to go back to a few tips that we've talked about kind of throughout this series. First and foremost, build an emergency fund. Get that dedicated savings account with the equivalent of 3 to 6 months of your non-discretionary expenses in it. What I want to emphasize here, doing this for most of us requires a lot of willpower and a lot of restraint and responsibility when times are good, right? When times are good, you have a little extra cash flow in your monthly budget, and you can actually dedicate this. So maybe instead of that fun weekend or that vacation, that extravagant vacation, maybe you go for a more moderate vacation, 5 days instead of 7 or whatever, and put a little money away in that dedicated emergency fund or saving. When times are good, that's when we prepare for times being not so good. And that emergency fund is what does it for us. Take advantage of interest rates when we can. Again, as I mentioned 2 to 3 years ago, if you're able to refinance your mortgage at 3%, great. I've talked to a lot of students and participants in programs like this that went to a 30-year mortgage at under 3%. So they're good through the 2050, right? And that's phenomenal. If mortgage isn't an option, consolidate outstanding loans, pay down credit cards, take advantage of those low interest rates when you can, either to reduce your expenses. I'm not saying build up credit cards or build up loans necessarily. In some ways that maybe is appropriate. Student loans, maybe that makes sense. But certainly try to take advantage of those low rates to consolidate or pool loans. When interest rates are high, as they kind of are today, they're higher than they've been in 10 or 15 years, certainly. As we talked about in a previous session, move some of your savings or checking money into a certificate of deposit. Right now, those rates are 5%. My savings is under 1%. So take advantage of that. The stock market this year is up 20%. That's coming off of a negative 22 or 22% decrease last year. So there's risk in the stock market. But historically, when interest rates are high, we do see relatively high returns in the stock market after a lag or after that shock of the high interest rates. The point is, be proactive with your money. Take advantage of those interest rates. Also, the kind of a weird personal finance tip, also be proactive with your career. And what I really mean by that, just kind of keep your eyes open for new opportunities. Look out for yourself. Look out for number one. If there's opportunities to diversify your income with a side hustle or part-time jobs, if your situation allows that, do it. But before you quit your job and go take on something new, always remember that risk and return usually work together. It's true for investments. It's also true for careers. And so you'll be careful, but also be proactive. Most of us, the majority of our income, our cash flow comes from our job. We get a lot of fulfillment and psychological benefits from our jobs too, but the cash is what feeds our expenses or takes care of our lifestyle. And so you want to make sure that those things are aligned, those things are connected. The other reason why I really like this piece of advice is the grass is not always greener, but if you're looking, it'll help you appreciate your situation more, and it'll help you feel like you're in control. When inflation gets to 9%, 10%, you feel like you're losing control. But for us, just psychologically, as humans, we want to be in control, if not necessarily of others, but certainly of our own situation. And just looking or thinking about your job will maybe help you appreciate the job you have already. If you're looking around and you realize, hey, the grass is not greener, I'm okay where I am. I'd like to be making more money, but all things considered, this works for me right now. So keep your eyes open. Be proactive, create control where you can through all three of these. So here I warned you some predictions. And I want to offer these, again, these are my opinion, they're my prediction, to help you think about maybe what to do with your personal finance situation, to help you think about maybe these tips about what opportunities you may have to be proactive and be in control. So what do I think? Inflation is decreasing. It was, June 22, it was at 9.1% year over year. It's now at 3%. 3% is higher than most of us have had in our lifetime or the last 20 years. 9.1% was a huge shock. What's going to happen the rest of the year? As I said earlier, we're not a speedboat. We're a massive cargo ship. 3% is really good relative to where we were. It's going to be a slow slog to get 2.5% or even 2%. Federal Reserve wants it to be 2%. I think we're maybe a year away from that, just before that just natural economy takes over. I think for the next 6 months, we're going to kind of hover around 3.5%. We're going to go up and down from kind of month to month, and then we'll kind of eventually, probably after the year end, maybe begin drifting down towards 2.5%. I think there's a very, very tiny chance we'll be at 8 or 9%. And by that, I mean, it's very unlikely. 4%, 5%, I could see that. I can't see 8 or 9% relative to where we are today. If there's a shock, then all this changes. But kind of where we are today, I think 3 to 4% is most likely, 5% is possible. Interest rates are probably about as high as they're going to go. Again, assuming inflation stays in kind of a 3 to 5% range. They might drift a little bit higher for some borrowers. Most rates have probably peaked. Again, you're not going to get your 2%, 3% mortgage rate in the next 6 months. Sorry. But, rates are probably not going to go much higher from here. They're also probably not going to fall very quickly. I think we're probably a year away again from inflation moderating considerably, which means we're probably a year away from interest rates moderating, significantly. So we're going to have this kind of next 6-12 months of a plateau in both inflation and interest rates, which maybe helps us get more comfortable with it. It helps us kind of buy some time. If the shocks are gone, maybe that helps our mindset. One of the problems with inflation is that wages and income has not increased as much as inflation did. Go to the store, things are 10% higher, your paycheck is 0% higher, maybe 2 or 3. Wages have slowly begun to increase for many people, but they haven't increased 9% for most people. And so they've lagged inflation, and that stinks. They may drift up, increase a little bit, but probably somewhat slowly. If you're fortunate to have inflation adjusted income, either through Social Security or through a union or some other contract, the cost of living is going to adjust those naturally. But for most of us, when our wages and income are subject to our bosses approving a raise, budgets are not allowing for that as much as inflation is hurting us. And so your income, while it may increase a little bit the next 6-12 months, it's probably at best going to increase at the inflation rate, maybe slightly less as it has the past couple of years. So that's kind of bad news, maybe. I think the job market is going to continue to be good. It's been very strong the last 2.5 years, kind of since beginning of 2021, once COVID kind of stabilized, I guess. I think it's going to continue. As I said, today, August 2nd, Wednesday, private payrolls were over 300,000 increase in July, which is great. The monthly average of the past 20 years is about 200,000, less than 200,000. So that's great. We may get to 150,000, may get to 250, 300 may be high. So there may be some slowing of that growth, but I don't think we're going to be consistently losing jobs month over month. I think we're a long way from that. The job market is very strong. One caveat to this is many of these jobs that are being created, they're maybe not the high quality jobs that people had 20, 30 years ago. Some are part-time, some are 29 hours, so the company doesn't have to provide benefits. And for many of us, that may mean you have to take on 2 jobs, 3 jobs, side hustle, whatever. But to me, the glass half full perspective is there are jobs available, and it could be a lot worse. So I think we'll continue to see the job market strong. And this, to this final point, this should drive wages and income up a little bit, just due to competitive pressures. But again, that rate change might continue to be slow. Stock market, I don't really know what's happening. I don't really know where it's going. Stock market gained 20% so far this year. We lost 22% last year. We gained 25% in 2021. My prediction, and I'm putting about a 35% confidence, we'll probably gain another 5% through December. We're 20% through the first 7 months. I don't think that's going to be doubled. I don't think it's going to get to 35 or 40% for the year. I think we're kind of at a Goldilocks level now with high expectations. And we're going to kind of bounce between +5, -5 for the rest of the year. Maybe we lose 5% by the end of the year. Maybe we gain it. I don't see us losing more than 10% the rest of this year. I think, again, we might have a plateau, but we're not going to see big losses there. And, back to some, the psychology, we're not in a recession. We have not been in a recession since COVID. And we're probably not going to dip into a recession. You hear the media, you hear economists talking about a recession. A lot of economists, a lot of Wall Street has been horribly wrong on this for the past year and a half. Past year and a half, we have not been close to a recession. We're not close to a recession now. Having said that, with high interest rates, we could be shocked into a recession relatively quickly. So it's possible. I don't see it. What does that mean for you? If your salary's not going up and your interest rate's going up, you don't really care whether we're in a recession or not. Your situation feels worse. But it's important to all of us that we're not in a recession, because then just that term, that word has enhanced psychology or psychological effects on us that makes us even more concerned. And you hear you're in a recession, then you're going to be afraid, or you're going to feel more constrained in what control you have. I don't think we're there. Again, I would not be surprised if the economy weakens over the next 6-12 months a little bit. I don't see it weakening a lot. One guy's perspective, one guy's opinion. Do with that what you wish. What's the moral? I think for any of us, the moral is plan ahead. When times are good, when you have a little extra slack, when you have a little extra income, plan ahead, do what you can. We can drift and dip into more challenging times pretty quickly. So plan ahead, take control when you can. So a review of a topic of interest we talked about in our Investing 101 session that I think really connects to this conversation about the macroeconomy, inflation. Last week, a student asked me, or participant, asked me, I've got a family member, I'm about to receive $50,000 from them. What should I do with it? Remember, finance is personal, investing is personal. We have to do what's best for you. And what's best for you is going to be dictated both by your goals and your risk tolerance. We all have different goals. We all have different risk tolerance. The advice I suggested to them, and again, this was a 50-year-old with 2 children in college, but I'm a teacher, so I wanted to give bigger perspective. If you're 25 years old, you have a lot of time to benefit from time. Pay off your bills, put some in cash, put some in a CD where you have fixed guaranteed returns, put a little bit in the S&P 500 index, take advantage of long-term stock market returns, and then maybe put a little bit, or a quarter or so, into specific companies, specific investments where you feel like you have more control and more influence and more connection. This approach may not be right for everyone. Feel free to change these numbers. But I think even in today's economic environment, this still makes sense. CDs have a really unusually high interest rate right now that's guaranteed in most cases, for the most part. Take advantage of it. If you were to tell me you're putting all of your money into CDs, that could be pretty cool. I wouldn't have a problem with that. So that's a 25-year-old. What if you're 55? 55, you have your time, your ability to benefit from time is less before you retire or cash out or need the money. So you want more security, you want less risk. I would get rid of the individual companies. I'd still put some into the stock market through the S&P 500 index. And then I'd just put more into cash, savings, and CDs. If you, regardless of age, whether you're 20 or 60, told me you want to take the entire 50 and put it into 4 different CDs, staggered CDs, the time frame, put 12,500 into 6-month, a 12-month, an 18-month, and a 24-month CD. Each is earning about 5%. I would say that's great. Really smart, really reasonable. You're taking advantage of unusually high rates. You have no risk associated with this. With the timing and the staggering, you've got some liquidity options, meaning you're going to have 12,500 of cash in 6 months from that first one. Everything else is locked up in a CD, but once these begin rolling over, then you have cash options if you need to refill your emergency fund or you want to do something with it. What's really unusual about today's situation is that at all 4 of these timeframes, they're earning almost the same interest rate, 5%. That's really rare. Normally, a 6-month might be offering 2 or 3%, whereas a 24-month is offering 5 or 6. Normally, we see longer term equals higher interest rate. Not today, not in today's economic environment, in part due to the inflation effect and kind of what interest rates are doing in the supply of money that we talked about. So take advantage of this. Take advantage of the CD rates, lock up money for 1, 2, 3 years, whatever you can, at these unusually high interest rates. Makes a ton of sense for zero risk. And I mentioned this because this gives you control, right? When in a turbulent economy, an uncertain economy, when inflation is this macro effect that's causing all of us pain, you want to feel some control. And an investment strategy like this, you go to bed at night knowing exactly what your returns are going to be. You're knowing exactly what your money's going to be in 6 months. If you invest in the stock market and these others, while on average, the returns of the stock market are going to be higher than in a CD, there is that potential for uncertainty, for volatility, for turbulence that may cause us a little bit more mental anguish than we really want right now. In a turbulent economy, when inflation is causing pain, we feel like we're losing control. And in some ways we are. We're losing control of our personal financial situation. You go to a laddering like this, you feel a little bit more control. You certainly feel a little less stress, a little less anxiety. And most of us don't have 50,000 that we're going to be able to play with. Make it 500, right? Or 400. Put $100 in each of these CDs or $1,000 in each of these. Whatever you can do, move your savings, you move your emergency fund even into CDs. I don't have a problem putting my emergency fund into a CD where I know it's locked up because it's an emergency fund. If I have a medical emergency, if I crash my car or I need that cash, I can take it out of the CD, lose my interest, which is maybe a small price to pay. I would have been losing the interest in a checking or savings account regardless. And so I don't mind making that commitment and breaking that commitment if I really need cash from my emergency fund. So emergency fund, savings, whatever, a strategy like this gives you both peace of mind and a sense of control, which is really, really valuable when we have the economic turbulence we've had for the past couple of years. 3 more pieces of advice. They're just kind of broad pieces of advice for everything. Ignore the media. I know that's tough. The media is dominant. You don't necessarily know how full of it they are or whether they've done their research or who's given us this advice. Again, 70-80% of Wall Street has been wrong for the past 2 years about predicting a recession. Very few economists or experts have predicted the no recession. Everyone's predicting an actual recession, and we're not there. The media then parrots that and follows up. So try to ignore the media if you can. Try to do your own research. You're not economists. You're not economics experts. I get it. It's hard to do the research, but something as simple as this kind of research and seeing that different CDs are offering the same rate and a relatively high rate, that's enough research to kind of give you peace of mind and feel like you can control things. Always focus on your own experience. Don't compare yourself to others. Don't look at the media or the big reports about the macro economy. And by focusing on your own experience, things could be both better or worse, right? Even though I'm telling you inflation's only 3% now, when you go to the grocery store, your actual inflation rate might be 5, 6, 10%, depending on what you buy or kind of what your lifestyle is. And that stinks, right? That's painful. Even though Bolton's telling you inflation's only 3%, it's not that bad. For you, it could be really bad. Or on the other hand, maybe you're just cruising with job security and you've gotten a couple of raises or whatever. In your experience, don't let it be tarnished by these negative or external negative dynamics. As I've said over and over, control what you can control. Giving, whether it's looking for another job, whether it's locking in interest rates of CDs, control what you can control. There's so much that we can't control with the economy and then with personal finance. Find things that you can control. You can control your decisions. You can control maybe your budget a little bit. You can make some decisions within your budget. You can't control necessarily the prices, but you can control what you do on Friday night or how many subscriptions you have. So there are things that we can control. Control what you can and recognize, accept that you can't control everything. As we're wrapping up, let's go back to a few kind of cliches or morals that we talked about throughout this series. Personal finance is personal. Make it about you. There's no ego in personal finance. There's no shame. Make it about you. Make it about your goals. Make it about your values. We haven't talked a lot about values this summer. Everything starts with your values, and your values and doing what matters to you has to be a core component of your personal finance. Make it about you. Indulgence is good. We like happiness. We like taking good care of ourselves. So don't be afraid of indulging. Take care of yourself, make yourself happy, but plan ahead. Try to avoid impulses. Sometimes we have emergencies, but that's not the same as an impulse. And the counteract to those impulses is planning ahead. Financial planning, having intentionality and just planning ahead. Your plans are going to be wrong sometimes, most times, but having that plan gives you a sense of control. Because personal finance is personal, it's hard to give advice that matters to everyone. But as I said, when controlling your budget, there's one piece of advice that works for just about everyone. And save where you can. Again, when times are good, sock away some money. Save for those, because eventually times are going to be a little more challenging. Save when you can. And the purpose of saving is it's the first component of this progress, this process for trying to create wealth or happiness, fulfillment, whatever our goal is, from savings to investing to a sense of ownership to a sense of wealth. It all starts with savings. We're trying to get to that wealth, that happiness, but it all starts with savings. And if you kind of eliminate whatever the process is, for most of us, savings is going to be the foundation for whatever personal finance related happiness we get. And money doesn't buy happiness, but money does buy options, and money does buy opportunities, and that can start with savings. And so when you can, control what you can. Everything starts with your values. It starts with savings, managing your situation to create this personal financial plan. But as we talked about in a previous session, the goals should not be burdens. The goals should not be chores. We want happiness. We want vacations. We want a new car. We want to have fun on Saturday night. Do it. Enjoy it. Enjoy you. We all work really hard. We work to provide this happiness. We don't work to make financial planning a chore. We work to create this happiness, to give ourselves these opportunities. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it does buy opportunity, an option. And it's up to us to make decisions that give us happiness, to use those options, to choose the options that give us happiness. It's never a straight line from here to wherever you're trying to get. We set goals, we analyze reality, we create a plan, we execute a plan, and then we work towards it. But when economic turbulence hits, when inflation hits, we have to change our plan. You have to cancel subscriptions. You have to take on a second job. We have to do these things. But by having that initial plan, it makes relatively small adjustments so much easier. Plan ahead. Make your dream become reality. Goal without a plan is just a dream. Wealth is the result of habit. It takes as much energy to plan as it does to wish. So make that plan a reality. I don't think I've introduced this other quote too many times throughout this summer, but it's from Alice Walker. Don't wait around for other people to be happy for you. Any happiness you get, you got to make for yourself. To me, that connects to this financial planning and uncertainty because of the control issue. Don't expect others to create your happiness, to create your sense of peace to create your financial plan, make it yourself, take control, be in control of your situation as much as you can. You can't control everything, but control what you can make the happiness that you want for yourself. That's it. 15 sessions up, 15 sessions down. The header to this slide is owning your financial future. Based on today's topic, we can maybe change that to controlling your financial future. You can never control your financial future entirely, but if you make a plan, you have intentionality, you have a purpose in your financial planning, your financial actions, you'll feel more ownership of your financial future. And for me, that's the ultimate goal. I can't control everything, but I want agency, I want ownership, I want my financial future to be the result of my work, my efforts. And I think if you're able to apply 20% of what we've talked about this summer, you're going to feel a lot more ownership and a lot more control of your financial future. As you are working on your financial future, please don't be shy. Brian.Bolton at Louisiana, contact me, reach out, we'll talk, we'll think about kind of what options are available for you. We'll talk about your goals and kind of where you go from here. Thank you all for participating this summer. It's been a blast. I look forward to doing whatever we're going to do in the fall of 2023 and throughout 2024. I don't know what that's going to look like, but we're going to do something. I enjoy this too much, and I think this work or these conversations are too valuable to end. So we'll keep talking either one-on-one or in formats like this. But do what you can, make a plan, create the future that you want as best you can. Thank you for joining, everyone. Signing off until we figure out whatever series or session is next. Stop.